This video is created for educational and informational purposes only. Do not use this information to interfere with networks or devices you do not own or have permission to test. You are solely responsible for how you use this information. Metasploit is a penetration testing framework, specifically an exploit framework. It is a very powerful tool used by almost all hackers, whether good or bad. That's why it's crucial to learn it. It is developed by Rapid7, which also offers other useful tools we might discuss in the future. Metasploit comes pre-installed with penetration testing Linux distributions like Kali or Parrot OS. When it comes to hacking, I highly recommend using these systems so you don't have to go through the unnecessary hassle of installing the required programs yourself. First, of course, we go to VirtualBox to launch Kali Linux. In one of my previous videos, I showed how to install Kali as a virtual machine on VirtualBox. I'm entering the password. You can also install Kali Linux in a dual boot configuration, allowing you to choose whether to boot into Kali Linux or Windows when you turn on your computer. With this VirtualBox method, however, Kali is essentially installed within the Windows system. Before launching Metasploit, it is worth noting that it offers 4 interfaces for interaction. One is the MSF console, the most commonly used one, and the one we will demonstrate in this video. There is also Armitage, the MSF CLI, and MSF Web. To launch the Metasploit console, we first open the terminal. I'll increase the font size a bit so it's easier to see. Now let's type. First, I'll switch to the root user using the sudo su command. Now I type MSF console. We wait a few minutes for the Metasploit framework to start up. There we go. We see a banner here, one that changes frequently. It changes every time you launch Metasploit. It's one of those little interesting touches they've added. Before we get to work, we need to check the status of the Metasploit database to ensure everything is properly connected and configured. That database will be very useful to us later on. We type db_status. It indicates the database type selected and shows that there is no connection. This means we need to exit now. We type exit to leave Metasploit. Now let's type the first command you should learn to run before starting Metasploit, msfd binit. We type msfd binit, then press enter. If you aren't the root user, you should type sudo before the msfdb command. We can see that the database has now started. It says it is already configured, so that step won't be repeated. It likely won't be configured on your system yet, but Metasploit will handle that upon its first launch. Now we type MSF console, we wait for it to start up, and that's it. Now we can type db_status. You can see that the database is connected. Metasploit consists of about 6 modules: the exploit module, payload module, auxiliary module, encoder, post, and NOP. The exploit is a module that leverages a vulnerability to your advantage. I will show you that module now. Then we have the payload. A payload can be, for instance, a reverse shell, and it gets installed on the victim's system. It is like a virus that gives you control over a computer, server, or phone. Then we have the auxiliary module. This is used for tasks like scanning and vulnerability discovery. We have the encoder. As the name suggests, it is used to encode a payload, for instance, to prevent antivirus software from detecting it, or forensic analysts from identifying what it is. Then there is the post module, used for post-exploitation. In other words, once you have breached a system, it helps you maintain your session. It assists in performing additional actions on the compromised system. NOT. This is used for buffer overflow attacks. We won't touch upon that for now. That is a separate topic. First, we will show you some basic commands. One of the key commands is the help command. When we run help, we get a list of all the commands available for use in Metasploit. Why is this useful? While it doesn't provide extensive details on how to use specific commands or combine them to perform certain tasks, it offers brief descriptions of what each command does. However, if you recall doing something but can't quite remember the exact syntax of a command, you can run help to locate it. Another essential command is search. Search allows us to find payloads, exploits, or any other element within the 6 modules I mentioned earlier. Since there is a vast number of exploits and payloads in Metasploit, it is impossible to memorize them all or know exactly how each one is used. This makes search incredibly useful when you discover a vulnerability and need to find a specific exploit for it. To use it, simply type search followed by a relevant keyword. For instance, if I've found a vulnerability on Apache servers, I would type apatch. You can see the number of results I get. On my channel, you can watch a video where I explained how to hack an Android phone using Metasploit. The machine has started up now. I really like TryHackMe because it provides brief explanations and instructions, literally a step-by-step guide on what to do. The only downside is that they don't explain the underlying logic or provide enough detail on why certain actions are taken. So, we're going to go through this a bit differently. I'll explain step by step what everything means and the reasoning behind each action. First, we'll connect to the Hack the Box servers, or rather, the Hack the Box network, using OpenVPN. You need to download the configuration file here and install OpenVPN if you don't have it already, though it should come pre-installed on Kali Linux. I'll open the terminal and a new tab, zoom in a bit, and type sudo openvpn. I saved the configuration file to my desktop, so I'll launch it from there. I'll press enter and type in my password. When it says initialization sequence completed, that means we've successfully connected. Before we do anything else, I'll open a new tab just to check if the machine is okay and if we can reach it. We'll take the IP address of the TryHackMe machine, type ping, and paste the IP. We're getting a response from the machine, so we know it's up and running. If you don't get a response, try ending the session and restarting it, but make sure to wait about 5 minutes for the machine to boot up. Now let's get back to Metasploit. What are we going to do next? We don't need TryHackMe anymore, so I'll minimize that window. I'll just expand this view a little. Metasploit has a very interesting feature that allows you to run programs like Nmap and a few others directly from within the Metasploit framework. For this reason, it is important to configure the database as the results obtained from Nmap will be stored there. If you aren't familiar with Nmap, don't worry. We will cover it in the next video where we'll explain in detail what it is used for and what you can accomplish with it. For now, however, we will use Nmap to identify vulnerabilities on the server we are attempting to hack. We type db_nmap-sv, inserting the IP address of the server we are hacking, and then press enter. Now we just need to wait for the scan to complete. What I'm showing you today is just basic Metasploit usage to introduce you to the framework and how to perform simple tasks, so that later you can move on to hacking more challenging machines on TryHackMe with a better understanding. The scan might take a few minutes. Here are the results. Let's see what we have. First, we can see which ports are open and the services running on them. As you can see, TCP port 135 is open and the corresponding service is listed there. Port 139 is also open, but it looks like I encountered an Nmap error there, so we'll ignore that for now and see what else we have. We can see a vulnerability related to remote code execution. The specific vulnerability is listed right there. You can Google the code to identify the exact vulnerability, find exploits for it, and so on. Since this is a TryHackMe machine, I already know where the vulnerability lies and what we need to exploit. This machine is vulnerable to various issues. There are multiple services, each with its own vulnerabilities, but we need to focus on just one specific service. We'll find out more about it by running the services command. As you can see, this is all the data Nmap provided to Metasploit, which was then stored in its database. On port 8000, we have the HTTP-ALT service, which is actually an ISK streaming media server. We know that the version they are using contains an HTTP overflow vulnerability dating back to 2004, I believe, which has certainly been patched by now. However, we are using this purely as an example to demonstrate how Metasploit is used. To exploit this vulnerability, we will use the ISCAST header exploit. You can simply type search and press enter to see the available exploit. Since this is a Windows machine, we have the iscast header exploit, which, as you can see, dates back to 2004. To carry out this type of attack, we need a multi-handler. A multi-handler is a specific exploit, or rather, a component of Metasploit, that helps establish a connection between a specific exploit and your computer. It essentially listens for a connection. As the name implies, it acts as a handler, attempting to accept and manage that connection. Before utilizing this component, we first need to configure the handler. We type use exploit /multi/handler. The use command is used to specify which exploit you want to employ at a given moment. If you want more information about the current exploit, simply type show info to see additional details. If you want to find out a few more things, just type show. You will then be presented with options such as AL, encoders, NOPs, exploits, payloads, etc. We can check the available settings by typing show options to see what parameters are required. Typing just options yields the same result. We need to configure the lhost parameter for this exploit. Lhost stands for listening host, meaning the machine listening for the connection, which is our own computer. We type set LHOST followed by our computer's IP address. However, since we are currently connected to the TryHackMe network via OpenVPN, we have been assigned a local IP address within their network. To find out what it is, we open a new tab and type IPADR. Let me quickly summarize. After pressing enter, we see some information about our home network, but that doesn't concern us. We are interested in the Tune0 interface, where we can see the relevant IP address. That is the IP address we need to use while on TryHackMe. We return to Metasploit, enter that IP address, press enter, and that's it. Now if we type options, we can verify the setting. Everything looks correct, so we proceed. Now we need to use the icecast header exploit. We type USE. As we saw earlier, there is only one icecast header exploit available. As you can see here, when we ran the search command, only one result was returned. This means we can type use icecast header and press enter, and it will automatically fill in the full name. Here we need to specify the remote host. So we need to enter the IP address of the machine we are hacking. That is the Windows server from TryHackMe. We type set archost followed by their IP address. It's this one right here. We copy it. We right click, select paste clipboard, and press enter. Now we can see that this archost is set. The only thing left to do is launch this exploit. We have all the parameters configured. We type exploit, and as you can see, we've established a connection. What does that mean? It means we've broken into their server via the iCast media streamer vulnerability using a reverse shell connection. If we type FWD now, we can see we are in the iCast 2 Windows 32 folder. We can type cd ... and then ls. We see some standard Windows folders there. We type CD and ls again. We can see and confirm that we are on a Windows server. We have users, Windows, and program files. Just like any Windows computer, we can enter the users folder. We type ls to see which users are there. We have dark, default, and public. Let's go into dark, for example. It sounds interesting. We type ls to see what's inside the dark folder. We can access the desktop for this dark user. We type ls, and you can see a few files there. So what's the main point? We've broken into the server using the Metasploit Framework. We exploited a vulnerability present on the server by finding a specific exploit for it within Metasploit. We will now show info and do the rest. We will also make an installation for a Metasploit tool and other things. Just follow my steps. So now you can exactly see how the Metasploit tool works and what the tool can do to the other computer or server. We exploited a vulnerability present on the server. We found a specific exploit for that vulnerability within Metasploit. If you discover a vulnerability but aren't sure which exploit to use, simply Google the vulnerability and you will find out what can be done using Metasploit. It is advisable to learn a bit about the exploit before using it. Blindly exploiting a vulnerability isn't very smart if you don't understand how the exploit actually gains control over the vulnerability and the server itself. That covers everything for this video. See you in the next one. Bye.